everyone, it's Sid from Cool Moviegram, your source for everything about cool movies. Be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell icon for further content. Today I'm going to be going through it's like a comparison, not exactly kind of like a review, but about two films. Okay, City on Fire, 1987, Hong Kong, directed by Ringo Lam, starring Chow Yun-fat and Danny Lee, and Reservoir Dogs, Hollywood US movie directed by Quentin Tarantino, starring Harvey Keitel, Tim Roth, Steve Buscemi, Michael Madsen, and a host of others. City on Fire tells the story of an undercover cop who's wanting to quit. He wants to retire, he wants to give up this life, since he kind of feels like he's trapped between two worlds. But he's coerced by his superior in taking up a case to bring in a gang of jewelry store thieves. And as he goes through, he has to go against overly zealous, corrupt cops who are trying to bust him, and also trying to protect himself and try not to give away his cover whenever facing criminals. But at the same time, his personal life is a mess, and he's involved with a beautiful club hostess played by Carrie Ng, and his relationship is on the rocks. Things kind of turn a bit sour for him when he is asked to become a member of their crew and take part in a jewelry store heist. Reservoir Dogs, of course. A bunch of guys given code names, nobody knows each other's real name, take part in a jewelry store heist. It goes wrong when they are ambushed by police officers, and they all end up in a warehouse, and the surviving members decide to try and find out that there's a rat in between one of them, and they're trying to find out what went wrong and who is responsible for the cops to be there, who was the undercover. Both of these films, I love both of them. To be honest, I saw Reservoir Dogs much before I saw City on Fire. If it wasn't for Reservoir Dogs, I would never have gotten into to Ringo Lam. I would have never learned about this film, and I would have never have known how great he was. And yeah, I thought, this is what I thought. I mean, City on Fire itself is it's a very gritty, realistic kind of look at undercover work when it comes to to police officers who actually are in that kind of line of work, and then the dangers that they have to face. I mean, they have to kind of like protect themselves from cops who are kind of familiar with them just for being criminals, and then also they have to kind of protect themselves from other criminals finding out that they are actually undercover police officers. And what Chow Yun-fat had actually done in this film with his performance, he captured the paranoia. I mean, that's another thing that Ringo Lam does great. I mean, if you watch films like Full Alert, and even films like Prison on Fire, they have this certain sense of anxiety and paranoia about something bad's about to happen. But he just kind of goes through this whole kind of this journey where like people have to actually kind of question their loyalties and question whether or not, whose side they're on, who's right, who's wrong. I mean, these kind of lines are blurred. And it kind of becomes a very multi-layered type of crime thriller, whereas Reservoir Dogs, it's kind of interesting because you get to kind of, it's almost like the characters. Like, for example, they could be sitting down in a cafe talking about what the meanings of a Madonna song, actually, what the lyrics of a Madonna song actually mean, and what kind of movies they like, what kind of music they listen to. But at the same time, you got this whole element of like, yeah, these guys are actually not exactly great, nice people. They're taking part in a robbery, and then you kind of see this whole honor amongst thieves kind of um, parallel where one of them is injured, and then the other guy kind of like one of them starts to kind of feel sympathy for them, and then of course breaking the code, as in you're not supposed to use your real name, but then also you kind of end up using your real name and whatnot, and it creates an interesting kind of subject matter. And I mean, I love both of these films. And the writing for both of these films is great. I mean, Quentin Tarantino's script is snappy, it's witty, and it paints an interesting world in terms of the characters involved. I mean, the violence is in both films in some occasions is rather brutal, and City on Fire is not as stylized. It's not as like kind of, it doesn't make the violence look cool the way that Tarantino's film did. I mean, Tarantino's film. I mean, he did have like scenes where, like, of course, the police officer. I mean, the use of music was great as well. They had a really interesting, cool soundtrack, and for a debut, it was really good. But then, of course, some scenes were directly lifted from City on Fire. Notably, the scene being where Harvey Keitel uses two guns and he just unloads at a police car, ex- more or less a frame by frame copy of a little scene from City on Fire, where you see Danny Lee, who's playing the thief, actually kind of like just massacres everyone in a police car. And of course, at the end, when all the characters are just pointing guns at each other, but of course, there were just changes in like in the framing, but in terms of like the the dynamics of the actors and the actual things that were going on between the actual characters itself, it was pretty much exactly the same. This film was a big inspiration for Reservoir Dogs. Not it's not a quote unquote direct ripoff or a remake, but pretty much kind of like a homage. This was, I mean, this pays homage to quite a lot of films, especially from like the 60s, the 70s, and a lot of like Hong Kong cinema. Even the outfits. I mean, they're all wearing black suits with a with a white shirt and black tie. That's kind of like a it's kind of like a little homage to John Woo's A Better Tomorrow too, where you see the protagonists actually wearing black suits with a tie. That was also used in Pulp Fiction, where Samuel L. Jackson and John Travolta also wear the same outfits. And yeah, this was actually, I mean, this definitely one of if possibly Chow Yun-fat's best performances. He had won awards at the Golden Horse Film Awards for Best Actor, as well as the Hong Kong Film Awards as well. And Ringo Lam also won the Best Director award for this. And of course, Tarantino's one. I mean, this made his career. Reservoir Dogs made his career, definitely. Overall, I would say both of these films, I'd give them a 5 out of 5. I think Ringo Lam's best film by far, and 5 out of 5. One of Tarantino's strongest films, and probably one of the best debuts ever made. I mean, this is the film that kind of like introduced a lot of Western moviegoers to the likes of John Woo, Chow Yun-fat, Ringo Lam, and Hong Kong cinema. You know, cinema beyond Hollywood itself, and definitely, I would say both of them do provide an interesting perspective. And one's about the build up towards a robbery, which is City on Fire, and the perils and the problems a undercover cop would have to face on a day-to-day basis, either trying to stay alive and also trying not to get his cover blown, whether it's either from criminals or even from other police officers. And then one's about the aftermath of a robbery that's gone wrong. I mean, that's where most of the focus for Tarantino's Reservoir Dogs is. I mean, I've seen a lot of people saying that, oh, Tarantino just ripped off City on Fire, but he didn't exactly rip it off. There were heavily scenes heavily inspired from, and elements from City on Fire were inspired for Reservoir Dogs. Reservoir Dogs was totally inspired a lot by City on Fire, by some of the scenes especially, but it kind of took it in a different direction. It kind of painted out the characters a lot more, whereas the main focus in City on Fire was about the character himself, which is Cole Chow, played by Chow Yun-fat, and you also get to learn about the reasons why. Well, the characters, like for example, Danny Lee's character, why he became a thief. And you have this kind of really interesting scene where it's the night before the robbery, where they start talking about their own personal lives. Like for example, it's this is the reason why, and there isn't really much of like a kind of the way that Reservoir Dogs is. The characters, they're not supposed to know each other's names. They're given names like Mr. Orange, Mr. Brown, Mr. Black, Mr. Blue, Mr. Pink, and Mr. Blonde, and all that, and they're not supposed to know each other from, like for example, they don't know well what school they went to, or who's whether they have kids, whether they have a family, whether they have close ones or anything like that. These are the versions that I have. This is the 2 disc special edition DVD, which comes with like a commentary with Quentin Tarantino, producer Lawrence Bender, and also the cast and crew. You got the trailer, you got deleted scenes, interviews from like Sundance, when Tarantino did back in 1992, Tarantino about his influences, tribute to Lawrence Tierney, and also, of course, the introduction to film noir, which is like, and also location scouting, kind of like where the film was actually shot, and just details given about the film itself. And this is, of course, the now out of print special collector's edition from Hong Kong Legends, which was released on Region 2 in the UK. Of course, comes with a commentary, a feature-length commentary from Hong Kong film expert Bay Logan. And also you got interviews with Andrew Lau and Roy Chung as well, who's the antagonist in the film. And yeah, definitely, I would say if you've seen both films, I mean, what are your takes on City on Fire and Reservoir Dogs, or what would you say is what is your opinion on this matter? I mean, I've seen a lot of people say, "Oh, Reservoir Dogs is just a rip-off," but then I'll just say that it was just inspired. I mean, it had quite a lot of inspiration from quite a lot of movies, and just the whole kind of noir kind of feel. But then it was done in a different direction to City on Fire. City on Fire itself was they have a very different feel from one another. One's very stylized and hip with a cool soundtrack, and one is like just a kind of a crash course into paranoia, anxiety, and the dangers of undercover work. Especially when you see a scene in City on Fire where a an undercover cop is killed by a gang of thieves who find out his truth, and how the police captain actually deals with the death of one of his subordinates. And that's not something that was covered in Reservoir Dogs, but again, that's why I say they were just different films. The films had a different kind of like feel to them. That's it then. Remember, also follow me on Instagram, and I'll see you on the next video.